I think the news to start with is Microsoft held one of their big conferences. They have several, but one of their big conferences called Ignite, last week, and I think you and I maybe had different takes on it. I'm not sure. I'm not saying I was like super bullish on it. I think Microsoft has some very interesting challenges, but
Hmm.
um, I mean, and as always, they cover a ton of ground. I think this is one of their challenges, but some of the stuff specifically around their Copilot Agent Studio, and some of the other elements surrounding that, I thought were quite interesting. And we're seeing, to me, this real battle sort of shaping up between them and Salesforce and
Hmm.
ServiceNow. Maybe ServiceNow sort of is on the fringes of that, as sort of the second layer, right? You have the model battles happening with the open AIs, and of course, they're all picking players, right? So we're going to talk later about Amazon, and so you have all these model plays, and now and then you have like this sort of, I guess we'll call it the agent layer. I mean, we've talked in the past about the AI application layer, but these aren't really that either. They're sort of there, and so it's like this middle ground that's being carved up, and it was some interesting takes. So we'll start with yours. You had a sort of an I'll say a slightly negative view of it. So what was your take on it?
Yeah, so of course, this was going to be about AI, 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 but frankly, every enterprise software show this fall has been the same. So I can't really blame Microsoft for that. And to Microsoft's credit, they have been one of the leaders in introducing AI to the enterprise. I feel like, in general, Microsoft spoke to its strengths around supporting a wide variety of models and vendors out at the model layer, but I was a little surprised to see what they were doing at the agent layer. I thought I was expecting to see, frankly, more agents and with more different types of use cases because uh, Microsoft really does play all the way from productivity tools to SQL Server and data warehouses to going to the cloud. They even have their own CRM dynamics. So they have all the use cases to support a wide array of different agents and activities and use cases. And I felt that that part was a little bit lacking. And I think that comes back to Microsoft's DNA of being an office first company. They've always looked at productivity tools for what is basically unstructured and semi structured data that does not have a specific use case in mind. And that's how Microsoft is coming into this AI world. And I think we're going to start seeing the fragmentation of AI happening now, where there's going to be more consumer based AI and more enterprise AI. And right now, Microsoft is, to me, it looks like it's choosing more the consumer road.
So what I find interesting about that is, VentureBeat wrote two extremely positive articles about the event,
Hmm.
which I found a little bit shocking, because they're normally pretty down middle of the road. And I mean,
Hmm.
I don't think this was like, paid for anything, but they were very almost gushing about Microsoft's enterprise strategy, and at least I think comparing it to, say, OpenAI or Anthropic, the model players, how they have a unique play. What I think is interesting is clearly Salesforce and ServiceNow are clearly enterprise focused. And if we look at the other
Hmm.
perspective, we're going to talk about Snowflake later today. Snowflake and Databricks also very enterprise focused. So Microsoft is clearly not alone in focusing on the enterprise. And to your point, and this is where I actually see this as more of a negative than a positive, is that they are so broad, so horizontal, that
Hmm.
I don't know how they can possibly. It's why they have, over 100 co-pilots now. That's why when, you go and read through the announcements out of Ignite, it just like you can't possibly consume it all because it's so much ground. And I think this is their vulnerability. I think this is the potential weakness. But one of the things that I thought was interesting, is that they touted a couple of numbers, that, one of which is, they have 100,000 organizations, which I read as customers,
Hmm.
creating or editing AI agents through its Copilot Studio since it launched. That's a crazy number, in my opinion. If we compare this to other players out there, They're also claiming to have, and I don't actually understand this, 1,800 large language models as part of their catalog for enterprises to choose from. Um, I don't know where they're getting 1,800. I don't know what that looks like. These are flavors of, I mean, there are not, well, that I'm aware of, that many true foundational LLMs. So maybe these are little
Right.
tuned ones. I don't know what they are. But nevertheless, very clearly focused on these enterprise use cases. And then the last little piece that I thought was interesting is there was an announcement that they made about um, partnering with companies like Bayer and Rockwell Automation and a few other companies that I hadn't heard of about building these very targeted industry specific SLMs. And on one hand, that can be a great tool for anybody who is in those spaces trying to build products and leveraging them, and is potentially threatening to any startup who's trying to create a targeted AI model for a specific industry. So I looked at the whole thing in total, and it was this sort of really interesting sort of dynamic um, as to where they're playing. But to your point, the challenge is the challenge has always been that they just cover so much ground. Can they really
Mhm.
cover it well enough, deep enough to compete? And so that's going to be the big challenge on execution.
Right. So Microsoft is definitely trying to play with almost everyone here. And I think I agree with you that the small language model announcement is very interesting in that somebody has to be the store for these small language models at the end of the day. And Microsoft is taking a first step towards being that store. AI is a little bit different from some of the other foundational changes we've seen in IT over the past 20 or 30 years. It's not quite like when the internet first came in. It's not quite like mobile in that big companies just have an overwhelming advantage. I don't think some company is going to come out of nowhere to be the big model store or the big agent store. It's going to have to be one of the existing, call them dinosaurs or call them Goliaths, what have you. But it's going to come from the current generation of companies, I think.
Well, I do think it's interesting. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit later about a report that coming out of Menlo Ventures, and I do think we're seeing some interesting trends around that. And I've been actually talking to a bunch of CIOs recently, and clearly there is a sense of safety with working with these major players. But remember,
Mhm.
OpenAI is now a major player. They didn't exist, at least commercially, just a few years ago. So it can change quickly. And I also, but what I also heard and have been hearing is that there's a ton of openness for startups. I mean, this whole space is so new that you're going to see this whole continual like shift. It's like trying to build a house on shifting sand, and I think
Mhm.
that's going to make it. And it's interesting. This is sort of off topic a little bit, but Amazon has quietly been rolling out and talking about one of their platforms called Bedrock, which is really and
Yes.
it intended to sort of help with that because it's this
Mhm.
sort of aggregation layer for models so that you can change your bets and build on top, which leads me to the part that, and this isn't specific to Microsoft, this is I think across Salesforce, across even for ServiceNow and their current approach, is they're all sort of predicated on this idea that enterprises are going to be interested and willing to invest in the effort to build out these agents.
Mhm.
And I'm not quite sure I buy that. I guess we will see. I think it's very early, but I mean, I feel like we've seen this before with RPA and things like Chef. You remember Chef's recipes and all of
Mhm.
that, and obviously those are successful and they had traction. And then eventually there was this tipping point where it's like this is just the overhead is too much, and I fear that and we've talked about this before, that we're going to see more of the same here. So, to me, I think I'm probably more bullish on their announcements and more positive about what they're doing than you are. But I think there's still a lot of question marks about where all this is going.
But also, agent authoring seems to be the new prompt engineering as far as AI goes. A year ago, we were inexplicably talking about how prompt engineer was a new job, and now we realize where the work really is. The agentic AI feels more real, but with Microsoft with 100,000 clients building agents in Salesforce trying to build a billion agents before next year across their ecosystem throughout all their users. Like, I think it's going to be fair to say that by the end of 2025, the average techie is going to have a pretty good idea of how to build an agent and how agents can go wrong.
Yeah, and again, just as a reminder of how early this is, I know you were at Dreamforce, and so you played with one. I haven't been able to get my hands on anything to actually start testing this. I mean, we are still so early. Even those of us that are sort of really into this have trouble actually playing with any of this technology to actually see if it's doing anything. So,
I would
it's
say that,
still
like, just having looked at the big guys, it is definitely worth your time to look at the, call it, 10-minute video that Microsoft or Salesforce puts into their agent building. I would recommend that for everybody who is getting caught up or stuck with having to manage AI.